So, that was a great interview.
It was. I appreciated it.
There were definitely a few moments that stuck out for me. The first one being when Dr. Williams was talking about how she had gone through broken heart syndrome or having those heart attacks from, what was it? Broken heart?
Yeah.
Broken heart? Yeah. And so she's basically describing how her body was reacting to that grief. So I wanted to know, did you have a physical reaction to your incarceration when you first went in, or like what are some of the physical signs that you felt from sentencing to actual incarceration?
The most physical sign that I had, and that's a good question. Thanks for asking. When I was incarcerated and my wife left me, I had never had a broken heart before. So it was funny when Dr. Cynthia Williams was explaining that because it's real, and I was like, damn, this is what it feels like when you hurt someone, and I knew that I had hurt, my wife, and also many people before that, and now I was in there and I was hurting, and there wasn't nowhere I can go. There was nothing to replace it with, you're not out in the free world, and you just got to just deal with it. And yeah, it's true. Like that's the first time that I realized what a broken heart really was. And physically, it's painful. And it literally feels like your heart is broken and cracked and ripped out of your chest. And the first time I experienced that when I was in prison. And I was able to truly understand. I think that was the beginning of me understanding how much damage and how much pain, I had caused other people by my actions. And so it was an extremely learning experience for me and a tremendous growth process. And it lasted for a while. So I really appreciated Dr. Williams talking about that because I've never heard it put that way.
How long into your incarceration did that happen?
2 years.
2 years in?
Maybe a little more than 2 years, yeah, but roughly 2 years.
Had you ever had those kind of conversations with your family? Like, how did they react to it, either physically, behaviorally, or emotionally?
You mean post-incarceration?
While you were incarcerated, like the shock of you going in and then while you were incarcerated. There's a kind of grief that comes with losing a father, a husband, a son.
Yes, I did. I had it with my wife, and yeah, that's exactly the way it was described. Like someone dying, like experiencing the death. And while I was in there, I did reading on like the different stages of grief. And I've never done any formal studying on it, but I have, put together my own ideas and research just based on reading, speaking to other people, primarily my wife, other people that I was incarcerated with, and experiences that they had with their wives, and that's also one of the things that I think needs to be taken into account for returning citizens and people that are incarcerated, because it's absolutely unequivocally very similar to what people experience when someone dies or when there's a divorce. The separation of the families, the feelings of isolation, the deep, deep depression that you go through. I mean, it's something that's serious. And I feel, well, I know that, the state, the federal government, the Department of Justice, they don't make available therapy or counseling or any type of, they don't give us the tools or any type of, I can't think of the proper word, but places where we can go, or places where people can look for help. They don't give us the resources. That's the word that I was looking for. The resources to be able to deal with those many stages of grief. And if I might add, when you're going through those stages of grief, when you're incarcerated, you don't have any resources in there really that's available to you to actually be able to deal with it. So in many cases, you go through these different stages of grief, and then you've never actually effectively dealt with it. And then however long you do, you're just released back into society, and you kind of got to just pick up the pieces of where you left off. But many times, once again, you don't have a support system, or even if you do have a support system, there's various stages of support systems, but there's just, once again, it goes back to almost I'll use an onion in this circumstance, but it's multi-leveled, multi-layered, and many different aspects of being incarcerated and coming home and having to deal with that, and just being able to assimilate back into society. And it's not easy if you don't have those resources and if you've never learned how to deal with those many different aspects.
Off the top of your head, would you know a number for like percentage of the population that is incarcerated?
I don't know a number, but I know it's over 700,000 people every year that come home that are released into society from prisons, either county, state, prisons and jails, and the federal government. Yeah, every single year. And there's more than 2.2 million people that's incarcerated in the United States at any time. I also can tell you that the United States, where we are not the largest population in the world, far from it, we are certainly the largest prison population by far in the entire world. The United States locks up more of their citizens than any other country in the world. So there's either one, there's one or two things must be true. Either the United States are manufacturing prisoners, or people that are born in the United States are predisposed to criminal behavior. And I don't believe that's the case.
The reason why I'm asking is because as you're talking about that, as far as like no support for families of the incarcerated, there's arguably like less people in the military, right? So I'm thinking of my own like upbringing. There's definitely counseling available for people who go off to war, and that's kind of, I guess, a more obvious group of people who would need the support. But why is it widely ignored in the States when we have such a huge population of people who are incarcerated, and there's no form of counseling or support available for the families of those incarcerated, as well as those who are in the prison system? So that's where my mind goes when you say that.
My mind goes to the same place, and that's a great statement that you made, and I appreciate you for sharing that. My personal belief is that, well, number one, I believe that what military suffers from, which is PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, is I think that prisoners suffer from the same type of disorder or syndrome. And in our country, because of the prison industrial complex, and because the United States and its capitalistic society has figured out a way to not only replace slavery, but to turn this whole churn of the prison industrial of manufacturing criminals, they've managed to turn it into a profit incentive to lock people up for long periods of time. You have private prisons, you have judges and prosecutors that are incentivized to give people not only sentences, but long sentences, because they are allowed to invest in private prisons. My own idea is why the United States and this prison industrial complex demonizes people when they go to prison. They have false narratives, so they're able to make something seem far worse than what it actually is in reality. And therefore, there's no lobbyists out there that are looking to fight for people that have been incarcerated, or people that are coming home, or their families. More often than not, it's the unfortunate, it's the underprivileged, it's minority people who are preyed upon through ways of selective prosecution, by the ability of the tool of being able to, the power of being able to charge certain charges, the way they charge them. It starts in the prosecutor's office, and this is a tremendous discretion that is given to the prosecutor. So, depending upon where you're from, or the lawyer that you have, the means that you have to be able to fight your case, could determine what type of sentence you get, whether or not you do jail time or no jail time, whether or not you have some type of deferred sentence or no sentence, whether or not you have a conviction on your sentence or no conviction, and therefore you don't have, the justice at large doesn't really have a sense of what's really going on. So they just have it in their mind that if someone does the crime and they end up in prison, that they deserve the sentence that they get. The old adage of if you did the crime, you need to do the time. So I just think people are misled because of the propaganda machine that's known as the United States. and therefore you don't have anyone. People don't have the means. You don't have the money. There's not companies out there. There's not lobbyists out there that's fighting. That's fighting with the legislators and convincing them that they need to have changes of law. And the lobbyists that are out there are constantly fighting for more and longer sentences, to be harsher on the sentences that are meted out to people because of the profit motive. So there's just so many industries that profit off of people going to prison that it's daunting to try and create some type of momentum where there would be resources and even sympathy for people when they do come home. So it's a lock them up and throw away the key. It's a perpetual and never-ending punishment, even after you've done the crime and after you've done the time. You're still not fully forgiven in the United States, and I would say that they even place just a mountain of obstacles to make it harder on you when you come home, which could even increase recidivism, which is continuing to commit more crimes and end up back in the never-ending cycle of incarceration.
Mm-hmm. Did that spark anything for you, Dr. Williams, hearing about the support system for families of those incarcerated?
Yeah, it really does, because I know how that dynamic is left with a different narrative. I think that people forget about who's left with the person who has to go. I think they forget about them leaving families, whether they're attached to them, whether they're married, right? Oftentimes men have several women who have children by them. And every time a man has a family, people look at it like, well, he's not with that girl. No, that's his family. That person who has that child, and then whoever is the extended family to take care of the child, all of their lives are affected. And I would be remiss to think that anybody does a crime other than heinous crimes to just not get out of survival mode. People are just trying to live. Most times people are trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and they think this one play gonna get them somewhere to make the end meet. But they don't realize that the one play could be that time. That's the consequence of the other plays that didn't get caught on. So the families are severely affected by whoever has to leave. And then coming home, the mental capacity of everybody attached to it is seriously affected. Everybody's attached to it.
And that kind of is a good segue into my next question that I had. Earlier in your interview, you were talking about how we can't enable men to, like, you know, when it comes to kids, especially male children, you can't coddle them, you can't enable them to do certain behaviors. But I wanted to know, were there any ways that either of you enabled your kids or your family to help compensate for the time that y'all lost during that incarceration?
I didn't. I think I came home just trying to understand the loss and how to get back on track. But when you're a single parent and you don't have no choice, you easily get back on track very quickly. Like you do. But I did know that without having a male figure in their lives on a regular basis, by the whole wake up, go to sleep with them in the house and give them the teachings, my biggest goal was to make sure they had mentors. They had to have other father figures, other men that understood that the life of a man should be groomed a certain way. It's barbershop day on Fridays. Is this how you wash yourself in the shower and you put your belt on and those kind of things. Those things were important to me, not being a male figure and having birth men or boys, for lack of better words. The biggest goal was that they become productive men in the community. Productive, not repeating the cycles of where they came from by our DNA. I knew that my daughter coddled to a degree, but also teaching her the same things. That we ain't being teen parents. We not running around here giving our bodies out. We not stripping for money. Like the things that I had to do, I needed her to be the better part of me. So the enabling factor couldn't become a place, because that they needed to be real, like taught in a real way of who I was and who I didn't want them to be and what generational barriers they needed to break.
What about you, Eric?
That's dope.
Did you enable your kids or your family to compensate for the time lost while you were incarcerated?
While I was incarcerated,
When you came home, was there anything that you did that enabled the people around you to try to like, you felt like you had to make up for the lost time basically, so you let them get away with certain things?
yeah, not really. You know, I think I felt like I had to make up for the lost time, but I did that by spending nothing in the world mattered to me more than spending time with my children. You know, so I made up with that lost time myself. I mean, I'm proud of that because I didn't spend the appropriate time with them before I was in prison. And that's one of the biggest lessons or growth processes that happened to me when I was in prison. And I'm actually thankful for that because I took a tremendous amount of things for granted, and who I chose to spend my time with and how I spent my time was the main thing. So when I had that time taken away from me, when I came home, I was so much more intentional about making sure that when I spent time with my loved ones, particularly my children, my parents, my children's mom, I was all in, and I'm like that today. Whereas before prison, I had a lot of distractions. I could be around them, but I'm on my, you know, I'm just distracted by so many of the different things that's going on. I'm embracing my role as that dude, as you know, whatever leader, organizer, all of them titles that the government put on me. I was him, you know, with respects to my circle and the way things flowed around me. And I allowed myself to be pulled in a bunch of different directions, all in the name of getting money. And I could always justify anything, you know, coming hours and hours late, having people wait on me. I could always justify that in my mind by saying, well, I'm paying for everything. I'm getting money. I got to do this because I'm getting this money. Y'all just don't understand. I'm in the streets. I got stress on me. I got to deal with this. I got to deal with that. It was all wrong. I'm not making excuses for it, but that's where my mindset was at before I went to prison. So if anything, I enabled people less when I came home because, you know, I was, you know, I've always been a very forgiving person. I had a big heart. But when I came home, it was almost like a burden was lifted off me of feeling like I had to spend time with people just because. I had to spend time with you just because we knew each other growing up or we were friends. Or, you know, I had to lend you money just because you asked. I didn't feel that way anymore because I knew there was an extremely limited amount of people that was there to help me when I was in prison, sending me money, coming to spend time with me, visit me. Very few people take the time to actually travel and come and visit you when you were in prison. Almost no one tried to help my wife or worry about. I mean, there were people that did it, but I'm just talking in you know, it's very few people. Some people tried to get at my wife. So nah, I came home with the thought that there was a burden lifted off me because you know, there was a part of me that felt like, you know, I did this time now, and now I ain't got to mess with you unless you adding value to my life. So I'm more of a mindset now that if you're not really adding some type of value in my life, I don't got to spend 1 minute, not even 1 second of my time with somebody that's not adding value to my life. A good friend of mine said to me, he said, yo, bro, at this age, you should never do anything. We should never do anything that we don't want to. So I'm more of that mindset now. And a lot of that came from more of an unforgiving attitude that I have because of the time that I was incarcerated. So yeah, I'm not giving jokers a pass no more. I'm not enabling.
And then my last question for y'all would be, there's a segment in the interview where Dr. Williams was mentioning how every birthday that her daughter has, she tells her daughter about her own story, you know, and as far as wanting your kids to be better than you were, you know, some of the decisions that you made. So I believe that there's kind of a having to get over certain embarrassment when it comes to telling your kids about your own history so they won't make the same mistakes. So I want to know, have y'all told your kids about your story in its entirety? Do they know all of you, or are there parts of you that you still keep away from them?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. So to answer that, there is nothing that my children don't know. I don't feel the need to be embarrassed with them because then I won't be effective in them being the best part of them that they can be. I know they could easily repeat me. It's part of their DNA. And the majority of the things I did that I don't want them to repeat happened before they were my children. So I would have to tell them about it, because one thing about the DNA and how God creates the life of the child that he gives you is we are our children and our children are us. We are all made just like God created us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, mother, father, child. And I think people don't recognize just how you could walk around and walk like your father, walk like your mother, look like them. You're not taught these things. So innately, we are actually every bit a part of each other. All three of us, the parent, the mother, father, and the child. So I would serve them an injustice to hold back. And my daughter, I remember her 19th birthday when I had her was the biggest thing I had to get over to tell her I was just having sex. I don't know about love so much, but she was created. And I was realistically with her to saying, we make a joke. And I said, I didn't know if the abortion was going to hurt or the baby was going to hurt. And I figured the baby would take 9 months. So let's just do the baby. And she looked like, dang. And I was like, I'm 19. I wasn't thinking that I was ready to be a mother again. And didn't know I was going to have a boy and a girl, right? And then I have her. And my third child is 6 years apart from her because I got this installed birth control called the Norplant that they were giving to young girls at the time at Planned Parenthood. And my son's father, who I met because we were having money, he like, I want my own child. So he paid like $3,000 at the time, which was a lot of money back in 1990. That was a lot of money. And it was when it came out because people couldn't even afford it. So I'm like 92, 93. He kept begging. I'm like, no, I got a boy and a girl. I'm done. And then I had the third child, and it was his first boy. And at that point, that was the only child I ever planned. No other kid was planned. So I needed to tell my kids, like, I'm a mother. I ain't never asked to be one. I never wanted to be one. I wanted to be one the proper way. But because people didn't teach me that, I needed to tell her, be a mother when you're a wife. And make sure that sex is not uncontrolled until you become a wife, because the struggle is real. So you got to tell them everything.
That's dope. I like it. I can feel that. That's going to reach a lot of people. So I'll put it this way. I have done a lot of things that they're embarrassing, but I'm not necessarily embarrassed about those things. And my life is an open book. So I don't number one, I got over being embarrassed. You know, prison will get you over being embarrassed. I mean, I never stripped, but I feel like I was a stripper in prison because, you know, they're gonna get it out of you. They're gonna literally strip you all the time. Just to kind of, it's a part of the dehumanization and breaking process. So I think that kind of helped me getting over being embarrassed about anything. Now, I don't hide anything from my children, but I don't necessarily volunteer everything. I mean, I try and use my past as teachable moments, and also I like to just, you know, as we are on this podcast, y'all already know we the realest podcast there is. I mean, everything is raw and uncut on this podcast, and that's how I like to keep it in real life with my children. So I do that as if to say, listen, all these things, like, I'm not bragging about it, I'm not proud of it, but at the same time, I'm not proud about it. This is the point of my life that I was at, you know, and I can use it to teach, to say these things that I did was absolutely wrong, and I can't go back and undo anything. And I guess I could say there are many things that I'm proud of, but not to the point to where it's something I'm gonna lie about. I don't believe in lying. You know, I just keep it real with them, so I can also let them know that just because if you do something that you might not be proud of, that doesn't mean that you have to hide it, or that you can't talk about it, or you can't come forth with it for advice. I like to let them know, listen, you can tell me anything, because I'm going to always be there to try and help you and give you good advice, because look at what I did. I tell them all the time, like, listen, I'm not happy that you did this, but I'm the poster child for messing up. Like, I am the black sheep of my family. Right. Like, I was not raised. Like, many people have been raised in a setting where they could say they didn't have a chance. I, for one, cannot say that. Yeah. Like, there were definitely negative influences that I saw in my neighborhood and things that led me to do the things that I did. But I can't sit here and say, like, that was the only thing that I saw. Like, I didn't have positive influences around me, because I did. So I'll say that to say, if my children or anyone asks me about something specifically, I'm going to tell it. But there is some minutia, or there are some details that I just don't feel necessary to bring that out. It's like, it's not necessarily gonna add anything, to me bringing out details that I necessarily meant. There's nothing positive that's gonna come out of me bringing it. Yeah. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, we sure? Because I know sometimes you'll be like, no. All right, we good? All right, that's what's up.
Aww.
Once again, we appreciate you so much here at In and Out Podcast. I'm just going to go ahead and say it again. Y'all already know. We are the realest podcast on the airwaves. Some people might even be afraid to watch because we got some of the baddest individuals on this podcast. Oftentimes, you're going to see what they refer to as ex-convicts. But in many cases, those are the people that I feel most comfortable with. And it is because those are the people that they try and talk about. Those are the people that most often are the unheard. Those are the people that don't have a voice. So we are here on this podcast to inspire, educate, and to motivate. And we want to let everyone know that you do have a voice, especially here on In and Out Podcast. So we want you to keep tuning in, because we're going to continue to give it to you raw and uncut, the unvarnished truth. It is real as it gets. Keep checking us out at INNOUT Podcast by Eric Geralt. That's In and Out Podcast by Eric Geralt. You know where to find us, wherever you get your podcast, on all social media podcasts, all social media platforms. Continue to check us out. We appreciate you for tuning in. And once again, we're out. Peace.